This is my true story. I spent my life working long hours, building a small home, and raising 3 children who once called me their hero. I believed when age came, I'd have peace. Maybe a small porch, a warm meal, and voices that cared. Instead, I was left behind in a care home far from everything familiar. They said it was for my own good. Weeks turned to months, and no one came. But you won't believe what I did next that destroyed them. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. I worked my whole life with my hands. Hammer, soil, and sweat built the house my children grew up in. I fixed every leak, painted every wall, and made sure no storm ever touched them. I wasn't rich, but my table was always full. I gave them clean clothes, school fees, and a bed that never felt cold. Every hour I worked, I told myself it was worth it. That one day when I got old, I'd sit in peace, surrounded by the voices I raised. But peace never came. The calls slowed first. Birthdays passed without a card. Holidays turned quiet. They said life was busy. I believed them. I waited by the window each weekend, telling myself they'd drive down when they could. The driveway stayed empty. The phone stayed silent. When my legs started hurting, I didn't say a word. I thought maybe they'd notice. Maybe one of them would visit and see I was slowing down. Instead, they came one day with big smiles and soft voices. They said a care home would be better for me. They said I'd have people to talk to, nurses to help, doctors close by. I nodded, trusting them like I always did. I didn't realize those words were goodbye. They drove me there on a warm afternoon. I remember the sun hitting the window, the road passing by slow. I looked at them in the mirror, thinking about all the times I had driven them, to school, to jobs, to weddings. Now I was the passenger, and no one looked back. When we reached the home, they helped me out, signed some papers, and said they'd visit soon. I smiled, believing it. I waved as they left. They didn't even look back once. The care home was clean, quiet, full of faces I didn't know. The nurses were kind. They called me sir, helped me to my chair, and showed me the garden. I told them my family would visit any day now. They smiled the way people do when they don't believe something but don't want to hurt you. I spent the first few days unpacking small things, my photos, my books, a folded flag from my younger days. I tried to make the room feel like home, but home doesn't come with a key someone else keeps. Days turned into weeks. The phone on the wall never rang for me. Every time the door opened, I looked up, thinking maybe I'd see one of their faces. It was always someone else, a delivery man, a nurse, another family visiting someone who wasn't me. I learned the sound of disappointment. It's quiet, it's heavy. It walks you back to your chair and sits beside you like an old friend. I watched the seasons change through the same window. The trees outside turned red, then bare, then green again. A full year passed. No visit, no call, not even a card. The nurses became my family. They brought me tea in the evenings and told me about their children. I listened with a smile. They had no idea how much their kindness kept me alive. My own children didn't even send a message. The same ones who once cried for toys now cried only for money. They sold my car. They said they needed help with bills. I told them to keep it. I thought maybe it would make them happy. It didn't. Nothing ever did. I used to pray for them every night. Now, I just whisper their names quietly before I sleep. Not out of anger, but out of habit. A father's love doesn't switch off. It just learns how to live without being returned. The days inside that care home all felt the same. The clock on the wall ticked, the TV hummed softly, and life outside my window moved on without me. Morning began with medicine, lunch came on a tray, and evenings ended in silence. The nurses were kind. They spoke gently, brought me warm coffee, sometimes even sat beside me when the others slept. They called me Grandpa Joe, though my name wasn't Joe. I didn't correct them. It felt nice to be called something that sounded like love. Every evening I sat by the window near the garden. The sun fell slow across the lawn, and I watched cars pass on the road beyond the fence. I imagined one of them slowing down, pulling over, and seeing me there. Maybe my son, maybe my daughter. I used to picture their faces, how they might smile and say, "We missed you, Dad." But the cars never stopped. They just passed by, fast, like time itself. Months slipped away. The calendar on my wall had birthdays circled in red. Theirs, not mine. I thought maybe they'd call on one of those days. The phone stayed quiet. Holidays came. I heard families laughing in the visiting room, bringing gifts, hugging their parents. My chair stayed empty. My hands stayed still. You can't force love to come back once it's gone. You can only wait until it remembers where it left you. The nurses started bringing me small gifts: cookies, socks, a blanket with my name stitched on it. They said I reminded them of their fathers. I thanked them every time, though I didn't have much voice left in me. My children used to call me strong. Now strangers called me sweet. Funny how life changes the words people use when they stop knowing who you are. Sometimes at night, I would wake to the sound of rain hitting the roof. I'd stare at the ceiling and think about the home I built. The smell of sawdust, the sound of the porch steps creaking, the way the wind used to whistle through the old trees. I could still see it in my mind, the house I paid for brick by brick, now belonging to people I didn't know. They sold it the month after I left. I learned that from a nurse who overheard it online. She didn't mean to tell me, but truth always finds its way through. I didn't cry. There are no tears left when your heart gets that tired. I just stared at the wall and whispered, "So that's how it ends." I used to think family was forever. Now I knew. It's only forever until money gets involved. They sold not just my home, but every memory I built inside it. My late wife's chair, my tools, my photographs, all gone. The home that once held laughter now held strangers. I tried to write them once. Just a letter. No anger, just a few lines to say I was fine and that I missed them. The nurse mailed it for me. Weeks passed. No answer. I waited by the door every day like a man waiting for spring in a frozen town. It never came. That was when I stopped expecting. But I never stopped loving. You can't turn that off, even when you want to. I prayed every night that they were safe, that they had enough to eat, that someone, somewhere, would remind them what kindness feels like. I didn't need them to visit anymore. I just wanted them to remember I existed. The world outside kept spinning, but my world became that one small window. I watched the seasons change, the sky fade, the snow fall, and the leaves return. Every day I woke, grateful for breath, but aware that my story was fading quietly, like a name carved into wood, wearing away with time. One morning, while I was having breakfast, I overheard the nurses talking near the hallway. They didn't know I could hear them. One of them mentioned my last name and said my children had sold my house months ago. My spoon slipped from my hand. I didn't ask her to repeat it. I just sat there, staring at the oatmeal, feeling the weight of that one sentence settle deep inside me. My home, the only thing I built with my hands and heart, gone. Sold by the same children who once played on its floors. That night, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. I thought about every nail I had hammered, every corner I had painted, every winter I had survived inside that house. It was more than wood and walls. It was where my wife and I built our life, where we raised them, where every sound had a memory. They didn't just sell my home. They sold my story. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My eyes had grown too dry for that kind of pain. I just lay still and listened to the quiet hum of the machines outside my room. Somewhere in the distance, a nurse's shoes squeaked on the tile floor. I felt small, smaller than I had ever been. I used to think nothing could break me, not the long workdays, not the years of struggle, not even the loneliness that came after my wife passed. But this broke me quietly, without a sound. The next morning, I went outside to the garden and sat in the same chair I always used. The air felt colder that day. A few old men played cards near the fence. One waved at me. I waved back but didn't speak. My hands trembled a little as I held my cup of tea. The nurse came and asked if I was all right. I told her I was fine, but inside, I wasn't. I had realized something painful. Family love can disappear faster than a flame in the wind, They didn't even call to tell me what they had done. They took everything, the furniture, the photographs, even the old chair where my wife used to sit. The money they got from the sale was split between them. That's what the nurse said she overheard. My name was still on the papers, but my permission meant nothing to them. I wasn't a father anymore, just a name they used to sign documents. That afternoon, I asked the nurse for a blank sheet of paper. I wrote down a few lines. Not a letter, not anger, just words I needed to see. "You will understand what I felt one day," I wrote. "And that day will hurt more than mine did." I folded it neatly and placed it inside my drawer. That was the moment I stopped hoping for their visits. I didn't want to see them walk through that door pretending to care. Love without respect is a wound that never heals. I began to see life differently after that. Smaller, simpler. I started reading again. I watched the news. I fed the birds outside. The nurses would joke that I was part of the garden now. They didn't know how right they were, because everything I had planted once had already been uprooted. When the sun went down, I sat by the window and whispered to myself, "Let time show them what they've done." I didn't wish them harm. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted truth to find them the way loneliness had found me. I wanted silence to become their mirror. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months. Sometimes peace doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from understanding you have nothing left to lose. That night, while the care home slept, I sat by my small window with a cup of tea that had already gone cold. The moonlight stretched across my table, landing on a small folder I had kept hidden at the back of my drawer. Inside it were papers I hadn't touched in years. Old insurance files, property documents, and one letter from my lawyer. My hands shook a little as I opened it. I had made a quiet will a long time ago, when I was still strong, just in case life decided to take me before my children learned responsibility. I had almost forgotten about it, but that night, every word came back to me. The will had conditions. Ones I had written carefully, not out of anger, but out of love that wanted accountability. It said my money and assets would only go to those who cared for me in my final years. I had written that sentence thinking it would motivate my children to stay close. Instead, it had become my final shield. I smiled faintly as I read it again. My lawyer, an old friend, had once told me, "Sometimes love needs paper to survive." I didn't understand it then. I understood it now. I picked up the phone and called his office. It was late, but he still answered. My voice was soft, tired, but steady. I told him it was time. He knew what that meant. For years he had kept my will sealed, waiting for me to give that single word. We didn't talk long. He promised to handle everything quietly, just the way I wanted. When I hung up, the silence in my room felt lighter. I looked around the space, the small bed, the old wooden chair, the photograph of my wife on the wall. I didn't have much left, but what I had, I wanted to matter. The nurses who cared for me had shown more kindness than my own blood. They brought me meals with smiles, held my arm when I walked slow, sat with me on holidays when everyone else had someone else to be with. They didn't owe me anything, yet they gave me everything. That kind of love deserved to be remembered. I spent the next few days writing letters. One for the care home staff, one for my lawyer, and one small note for my children. I didn't write to hurt them. I just told the truth. That I had felt their absence more than any illness, that loneliness had become my last disease. I didn't write much else. Some truths don't need decoration. Every night after that, I slept easier. I didn't feel powerless anymore. My voice was gone from their world, but my actions would speak for me when I couldn't. It wasn't revenge, it was balance. I had given everything I could in life. Now I was giving the last thing I had. Choice. The choice to decide who deserved what I built. One morning, I sat in the garden, the air cool and soft, and watched the sunlight stretch across the grass. The birds landed near my feet, pecking at crumbs. The world looked peaceful again, even though mine was ending. I thought about my wife, how she always believed justice finds its way, no matter how long it takes. I whispered her name and smiled. She was right. That night, before I went to sleep, I opened the window and let the cold breeze in. I folded the lawyer's letter and placed it on my bedside table. Everything was ready. I didn't need to say another word. The papers would speak when I couldn't. I closed my eyes and whispered, "It's time." The morning came quiet. No footsteps in the hall, no noise from the TV room, just the soft hum of wind against the window. I woke early that day, earlier than usual. The world outside looked peaceful, like it was holding its breath. I sat up slowly, dressed in the same old sweater my wife knitted long ago, and looked at the photograph of her one last time. Her smile still had the power to calm me. I whispered her name and thanked her for waiting. The nurse came by at 7 to bring breakfast. She found me sitting by the window, the letter already on the table beside my tea. She smiled and said good morning. I smiled back, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My part in this world was done. I felt no pain, no fear, just quiet. The kind of quiet a man feels when he knows he's leaving nothing unfinished. When they found me, I was still holding my cup, half full, still warm. The nurse screamed for help, and others came running. They checked my pulse, but there was nothing left to find. My time had ended exactly how I had wished. Calm, clean, without fuss. Beside me, on the table, they found my folded note. Just 2 words written in shaky ink. Read it. The staff cried that morning. They had known me for years. I wasn't their father, but they treated me like one. They called the doctor, then the lawyer, then the family. I imagine the call they got. Short, cold, the kind of news that freezes a room. My children hadn't spoken my name in months, maybe years, but now they had to. Death has a way of forcing people to remember what they tried to forget. By afternoon, the lawyer had arrived. He stood in my room for a while, quiet, respectful, reading the letter I had left. He didn't change a single word. He didn't need to. Everything was already in motion. The staff covered me gently with a blanket, laid flowers near my bed, and prayed. They didn't know that soon. The world outside that little care home would hear my story. Not through my voice, but through my last act. The care home felt heavier that evening. Some of the residents cried, others sat in silence. One of the nurses placed my photo on the small table in the hallway, surrounded by candles. It felt strange to think that even in death, I finally had company, people who cared. Meanwhile, my family drove down in fancy cars, dressed in black, their faces pale, not with grief, but guilt. The man at the front desk told them I was gone and that my lawyer would meet them tomorrow for the reading. They nodded quietly. Not one of them asked if I was at peace. They only asked when the papers would be ready. If I could have watched from above, I think I would have smiled. Not with revenge, but with understanding. They were about to learn that silence has its own voice. For years, they had left me behind in that room, unseen and unheard. Now, every word I had written would echo in their ears, louder than any argument ever could. The nurses prepared my small funeral with care. They didn't have to, but they wanted to. They used the little savings I had left for flowers, candles, and a plaque with my name. It was simple, but honest. The kind of goodbye love gives, not money. My photo sat beside the window where I used to drink tea every morning. I left the world quietly, but I didn't leave it empty. I left behind truth, written in ink that couldn't be erased. And soon, when that lawyer made the call, the same people who forgot me would remember my name. Not with pride, but with trembling hands. They say the dead can't hear, but if souls could listen, I think I would have heard that phone ring. It was the lawyer calling my children. The same voice they had ignored for years when he tried to reach them about simple documents. Now they answered in seconds. He told them their father had passed. He said my will would be read the next morning at his office. There was silence on the line, then panic. They asked about the house, the accounts, the land. The lawyer didn't say a word about any of it. He only said, "You should come." The next morning, they arrived. 3 grown adults in dark suits and expensive shoes, pretending to grieve. They walked into the lawyer's office with forced tears and practiced sadness. But behind their eyes, I know what they were thinking. Money, property, the things they thought I had left behind for them. The lawyer didn't rush. He made them sit. The air in that room was heavy. He placed a sealed envelope on the table. My name was written on it in old ink. He broke the seal slowly and began to read my words. I, the man you called father, leave behind no anger, no hate, only truth. When I was strong, I gave you everything I had. When I grew weak, you gave me nothing. When I needed hands, you gave me silence. When I needed love, you gave me distance. You left me in a care home and sold the house I built. So today, I return to you the same gift you gave me. Nothing. The room froze. My eldest tried to interrupt, but the lawyer kept reading. His voice didn't shake. To the care home staff who showed me kindness when they had no reason to, I leave the rest of what I own. My savings, my insurance, my land, and what's left of the house you sold. He read every line carefully. Every sentence landed like a stone in still water. My children sat pale, their faces drained. The lawyer folded the papers, placed them back in the envelope, and said quietly, "Your father was clear. This is final." My eldest son slammed his hand on the table. The others shouted, crying, begging him to check again. But the law doesn't bend for guilt. The signatures were real, the dates confirmed, the witnesses verified. The lawyer had been my friend for 40 years. He had stood by me in life, and now he stood by me in death. They demanded to know why. Why would I give everything to strangers? The lawyer said, "They weren't strangers. They were the ones who held his hand when you didn't." There was silence after that. The kind of silence that doesn't fade. They didn't know that every moment I sat alone in that care home, I had prepared for this day. Not out of revenge, but to show them what love really means when it's gone. The lawyer handed them my last letter. It wasn't long, just one line. "You left me behind in a care home, so I left you behind in my will." They didn't cry then. They just stared at the paper, their faces red with shame. Only later, when they walked out into the parking lot, did the weight of it hit them. They realized too late that the man they ignored had written the last chapter of their lives without needing to speak a word. In the care home, the nurses lit candles for me that same night. They read the news about the new funding for their wing. Money from a man everyone thought had been forgotten. My name was printed on the plaque by the entrance. It read, "In memory of a father who was loved in the end." If I could see it, I think I'd smile. Because I didn't just leave them behind. I left proof that kindness matters more than blood when blood forgets how to love. The shock didn't come all at once. It started quiet, a silence none of them knew how to break. My eldest sat frozen, staring at the lawyer's desk, as if the words might change if he waited long enough. My daughter tried to speak, but her voice cracked before it reached the air. The youngest stood near the window, his hands shaking, his face pale. They had come expecting wealth, maybe even power. But what they found was a truth they could never buy back. The lawyer said nothing more. He had seen that look before, the face of regret that comes too late. He gathered the papers, placed them neatly into his briefcase, and left them sitting in their own silence. They didn't move. The clock on the wall ticked slow. For the first time, time itself felt like punishment. My children left the office that day with their heads down. Outside, the sky was gray, the air heavy, and the wind cold against their faces. People passing by wouldn't have known who they were. Just three strangers walking quietly, carrying shame on their shoulders. My eldest tried to call the lawyer again, hoping for some loophole, some forgotten line, some small mistake. But the law doesn't rewrite love once it's gone. The ink was dry, the witnesses signed, the files sealed. When they reached their cars, they didn't speak to each other. They had always fought over everything, over who did more, who got more, who was right. But now, they had nothing left to fight for. My absence had finally united them in one thing: regret. They went home to houses filled with everything money could buy, but that night, nothing felt like theirs. The rooms were colder, the lights dimmer, the silence louder. My name echoed in every corner they tried to avoid. They looked for comfort in each other's words, but there were none. Because deep down, they all knew this truth. I had given them my whole life, and they had returned it empty. My daughter tried to sleep that night but couldn't. She kept seeing my face in her mind, not angry, just quiet. The same way I used to sit when she left the room too fast. My eldest son poured himself a drink, then another, then stopped halfway through. He couldn't swallow it. He realized he wasn't drinking to forget me. He was drinking to forget himself. The youngest sat in his car outside the care home's gate, staring through the fence at the lights in the windows. He saw the nurse place flowers beside my photo. He watched as others stopped to pray. He didn't go inside. Shame has a way of freezing the feet before the heart can move. The next day, news spread. The care home had received a large donation under my name. They were building a new wing, rooms for seniors who couldn't afford care, people like me who had nowhere to go. My children read about it online. My name was everywhere. For years, they had ignored me in life, but now the world knew me better than they ever did. That morning, a neighbor knocked on my eldest son's door. She offered her condolences. She said, "Your father was a good man." He nodded, but his lips trembled. For the first time, he didn't have words. He closed the door and sat alone at the kitchen table, the same table where he once signed the papers to sell my house. Now it was his turn to feel the cold side of silence. The shock didn't fade fast. It lingered. It followed them to work, to bed, to every meal. Every time they opened a bill or passed by a church or saw an old man on a park bench, my memory came back like a mirror they couldn't look away from. I was gone from this world, but my decision lived in theirs. A quiet echo reminding them that love, once betrayed, never returns the same. The begging began the next morning. The lawyer said he had never seen anything like it. The same children who once signed my name away now standing in his office, voices cracked, faces pale, hands trembling. They said they were sorry. They said they had made a mistake. They said they wanted to make it right. But some mistakes don't have doors you can walk back through. He told them the papers were final, sealed, and protected. My last will was stronger than their sudden love. They offered him money to change it. He refused. They asked to donate on my behalf. He said it was already done. They asked if there was any way to speak to the care home, to fix things. The lawyer looked at them and said quietly, "He already did." They left the office broken. Outside, the world moved as usual. Cars passing, people walking, birds flying. But for them, everything had stopped. The weight of what they'd lost wasn't just money. It was meaning. They realized too late that all their comfort had come from the man they left behind. Now that man had taken his final stand, not with anger, but with truth. My eldest drove straight to the care home. He parked by the gate and sat there for hours. He saw my name carved on the new plaque near the entrance, in loving memory of a man who gave more than he received. People stopped to look, read, and whisper kind words. He didn't go in. Shame held his body like stone. He sat in silence, gripping the steering wheel until his hands turned white. He wanted to cry, but tears refused him the mercy. My daughter came the next day. She brought flowers, not for me, but for herself. She walked through the hallway I once called home, past the rooms I once sat in. The nurses recognized her instantly. They said she looked like me. She nodded but couldn't speak. One of them took her to the photo wall. My picture hung there, smiling, gentle, framed beside a note I had written. It read, "For those who give love, even when it's not returned, thank you." The nurse told her I had left them enough funds to build a new section for seniors without families. My daughter's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Pride always dies slower than guilt. She whispered something under her breath and left without saying goodbye. The youngest was the last to come. He stood outside the door of my old room, not knowing if he deserved to walk in. He finally did. The bed was neatly made. The photo of my wife was still on the nightstand. The nurse said I used to talk to that photo every night, telling her about the stars, the food, and the people. The boy nodded, tears falling now, one after another. He asked if I was happy before I died. The nurse smiled softly and said, "Yes." He was at peace. That broke him. He fell to his knees, his hands shaking, whispering words only guilt can form. They tried to beg the care home director next, offering money, donations, anything to take back what I had already given. But the director refused. He told them my wishes were clear. Everything belonged to the people who stood by me when no one else did. For days after that, they couldn't sleep. Every dream was a memory of dinners they missed, calls they ignored, birthdays they forgot. They remembered the times I asked for small things, a visit, a walk, a letter, and how easy it had been to say, later. Now later was gone forever. I didn't need to see them kneel. I knew they would. Not out of fear, but out of the truth that always finds its way home. They had left me alone to die, but now it was their turn to live with what they had done. The days that followed were quiet for everyone, but heavy for them. The news of my will spread fast around town. Neighbors who once smiled politely at my children now looked at them differently. People whispered, not out of gossip, but disbelief. They couldn't understand how children could abandon a man who gave them everything. My family started avoiding the grocery stores we once visited together. They stopped answering calls, stopped going to church, stopped showing their faces at family gatherings. Guilt had become their new address. Meanwhile, the care home began its transformation. The old West Wing, the one with the leaky roof and dim hallways, was under renovation. Construction trucks came in, workers carried wood and paint, and the nurses smiled more than usual. The plaque at the entrance was polished every morning. It had my name engraved neatly with the words, "Built with the love he gave the world." Every Sunday, the staff lit candles in the garden. They prayed not just for me, but for every soul who had been left behind. They said I had changed something, not through anger or shouting, but through quiet proof that decency still mattered. Some of the new residents didn't even know my face, but they spoke of me like family. My story became a reminder that kindness has its own inheritance. My children heard about all of it from the same community that once respected them. They were no longer called successful. They were called ungrateful. The same people who used to admire them now crossed the street to avoid eye contact. My eldest stopped showing up to work. He said he was taking time to grieve. My daughter moved houses to escape the whispers. The youngest, the one who cried by my bed, started visiting the care home quietly every month. He didn't speak to anyone, just stood by the garden for a few minutes, looking at my photo before leaving. The care home's new wing opened 6 months later. They called it the Meadow Hall, a place for elders with no families, built from what I left behind. The first 3 rooms were filled with people just like me, forgotten parents, quiet souls, old hands that once held too much and were left empty. When the ribbon was cut, the local paper covered the story. The headline read, "A Father's Final Gift Changes Lives." My children read that headline too. They didn't talk to each other for weeks after. Shame built walls between them. They tried to donate anonymously to other charities, hoping to ease their guilt, but money can't buy forgiveness from a ghost. My decision had turned into a mirror that followed them everywhere. People began visiting the care home just to see the plaque. Some left flowers, others prayed. The nurses kept my photo near the window, the same spot I used to sit every morning. They said that when sunlight hit the glass just right, it made my face glow. Some of them swore it felt like I was still watching over them. One afternoon, the youngest of my children finally spoke to the director. He said he wanted to volunteer, to help clean, to spend time with the residents. The director agreed. For months, he came quietly, sweeping floors, pushing wheelchairs, watering plants. He didn't tell anyone who he was. He said he didn't want thanks. Maybe he understood now that true love isn't given for reward. It's given because it's right. I'm gone from this world, but the echoes of what I left still move through it. The house they sold became just another property, but the home I built, the one made of care, of hands, of patience, still stands, in a place full of people who understand what family really means. I was left behind once. Now I am remembered every day. When I look back now, I don't think about the pain anymore. I think about the peace that came after it. Being left in that care home felt like the end once, but it became the beginning of something I never planned, a truth bigger than me. I had spent my whole life believing love was about giving everything you have, even when you get nothing back. I still believe that. But love without respect breaks the soul, and no parent should die with a broken one. I didn't take revenge. I only gave silence a voice. The world I left behind moves on without me, but it moves differently now. My name doesn't sit on family walls. It rests on one made of brick and kindness. Every time someone walks through that care home's door, my story walks with them. Every cup of tea poured, every blanket folded, every old man helped into bed. I am there, somewhere in the warmth of it. The nurses say they still feel me when they pass the hallway at night, that the air feels gentle, calm, peaceful. I hope that's true. My children live with their choices. Time has softened their anger, but not their regret. They no longer argue about who gets what. They just sit quietly when my name is mentioned. They visit sometimes now, not out of pride, but out of guilt that has turned into understanding. They help the residents at the care home on holidays, not for show, but because they finally learned what love is supposed to look like. That is enough for me. I don't need flowers or candles. I don't need my name on paper. I left behind something more real, a lesson written in the way I lived and the way I forgave. The world may forget faces, but it never forgets kindness. I was left behind once, but the world found me again through the hearts I touched when I had nothing left to give. If you're listening to my story right now, remember this. Don't wait until someone is gone to see their worth. Don't let pride stand where love should. Family isn't built on blood. It's built on care, on time, on small acts that ask for nothing. The hands that fed you, the voice that guided you, the heart that stayed when the world walked away. Those are the real treasures. When they left me, I thought my life was over. But when the lawyer called, I realized something powerful. I hadn't been abandoned. I had been freed. Freed from pretending, freed from hoping for love that wasn't real. I left this world knowing I had the last word, not in anger, but in peace. Final thought. They left me behind in a care home, forgotten and alone. But when the lawyer called, their tears came too late. I didn't leave them my wealth. I left them my silence, and that silence still speaks louder than any apology.